2023, more like 2020, see you later, because the year's over.
It gone.
It's gone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's the most wonderful time of the year, again, which is list season. You already know what it is. You've read the title of the episode. It's our 2023 year in review. We're the Pod People. I'm Matisse. I'm joined by Ben and Cleve, as always, my favorite boys in the whole world. We're here to talk about the movies that we talked about on the show this year.
And unlike the Game Awards, we're not going to tell people to wrap up their acceptance speeches. You can talk as long as you want.
Game Awards, more like gay awards, am I right?
Well,
it would be sick if like 75% of this episode were just trailers for
new movies that are coming out next year. Yeah, I'll cram a trailer in between every single category, and this episode will end up being like 4 hours long. It'll be great. People will fucking love that. There will be no video, of course, for the trailers. It'll just be the audio. Well, if this is your first time joining us for a year in review episode, just break down quickly the way welcome. We're gonna do our bottom 5 films of 2023 first, and we'll do the top 5 films of 2023. These are all our personal bottom and top. Then we'll do some honorable mentions, and then last we will do the Poddy Awards. Poddy with D's, not potty like a turlet. It'll be a good time. Let's get fucking started. All right, Ben, why don't you start us off? What is your number 5 worst film of the year?
Sure. So my number 5 is The Meg 2, The Trench. I was pretty excited about this one going in. Ben Wheatley directed one of my favorites of the last couple years in The Earth, and I thought the first Meg was kind of fun. So to find this one extremely boring until like the last half hour was such a bummer.
Yeah, I'll go next just because my number 5 is also Ben Wheatley's Meg 2, The Trench. Just absolutely crazy that 2021, his last film, was my favorite film of the year, and then now he's in the bottom 5. And I made me go back and rewatch the first Meg before this and realize that that's also not as fun as I remembered from a few years ago. So just kind of, big fucking doo-doo stinker all around.
I'm so glad I missed the Meg 2. Happy to.
Yeah,
I actually did watch the first Meg on a stream. Thought it was okay. Not anything to write home about. My number 5 is I crossed out like 3 different things. Originally, I was going to put The Outwaters because I had a bad time watching that movie. Both times I watched it. Even watching it with the lovely Pod Boys couldn't make that better for me. Sorry, y'all. I know y'all enjoy that movie, but I did not. But I decided at least that movie has the integrity of being a small indie film that was made with any amount of care. Even if I thought that the little meat on a string was like kind of silly and lazy, like at least it's some folks out in the woods, like, or the desert or whatever, trying something new. So it's not that. It's
you just squeeze it in anyway.
Yeah, I just squeezed it in anyway. I like talking about my process.
What did you say your actual 5 was?
Renfield.
Renfield, okay.
That's perfect because that's also my number 4. What a mess, dude. Not even Nick Cage could save that piece of shit.
No, or the lead actor who's good.
Nicholas Hoult. Yeah, I mean, like, fucking premise-wise, like, you'd think Nick Cage Dracula, Nicholas Hoult Renfield, it's a comedy, like, that has, like, winner written all over it. But it's, like, fucking tonally inconsistent. The jokes are mostly not funny. And Aquafina is really annoying.
Yeah, see our episode on it. I almost don't want to complain about it too much beyond that. I think what I will say about Renfield is the first 5 minutes are fantastic. I really love the intro, and getting to see Nicolas Cage do a Bela Lugosi impression is a delight. Then I would just shut it off after that.
If we had a Poddy Award for most soy dialogue, Renfield would definitely be the winner.
1000%. My number 4 is Scream 6. Another just like pretty major disappointment. considering how much I enjoyed Scream 5, how much we all enjoyed Scream 5. And then they just like, well, what if we just did the same thing in New York, but more convoluted without anything new to say about horror as a genre or Scream as a franchise, and just sort of do the same shtick over again, but worse. I really did not enjoy Scream 6, and considering the state of the franchise going forward, I don't imagine that I'm going to enjoy the next one. So at least now I have tempered expectations.
The new one didn't have the juice. Like after like the first 15 minutes, which I thought was decent with the first kill, like it just was more of the same, and it's so disappointing from Radio Silence. You know,
truly, I expect much better of them.
I'll tell you what
overall
kept it off my list is because I agree with all that. You're absolutely right. I do really like that one sequence in the bodega where he's got the shotgun. I like that part of the movie. That
like
my memory,
like Ben was saying, like I think that part happens within like the first 15-20 minutes. It's like the movie starts relatively strong, and I agree with that, but then it just like it gets so uninteresting so fast after that.
Yeah, it follows the same formula. Well,
yeah, what's your number 4, Cleve?
Oh, my number 4 is, it's not a terrible stinker. It hardly belongs on this list, but I put it there anyway because, my expectations for what a movie like that could be. It's the Demeter. It's the last voyage of the Demeter.
Oh, interesting.
It's a mid film. It's not very memorable, and I find that to be more of an offense than at least a movie that really pisses me off or whatever. I think just like, I was just looking over that list and I was just like, I don't know, it's just kind of pathetic how forgettable that movie was.
I agree. It's certainly not a great film. It's pretty like squarely in the middle of my ranked list of films from this year, because like I think it's fine, and it has like a handful of pretty good sequences, and nothing about it is like offensively bad, but it is just like a pretty huge waste of a good premise, and just forgettable, just a forgettable movie.
Yeah, and how you gonna make Boat Dracula forgettable? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I think it was one of y'all whose joke was it when we talked about that Andre Overdahl is the the Demeter is very good, but one of y'all said that Andre Overdahl is like the master of like airplane horror, or it's like the type of movies that you like watch and enjoy on an airplane.
Yeah, I think that was Ben.
Yeah,
it's accurate, honestly.
Well, Ben, speaking of Ben, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Five Nights at Freddy's. Talk about a weird, disappointing movie. I didn't really have expectations going in, and somehow I was still disappointed.
That's also mine.
I can't say that I was disappointed by Five Nights at Freddy's because I had no expectations for it, but I still hated it a lot.
Into Five Nights at Freddy's, like he had his Five Nights at Freddy's popcorn. He had his Bite of 87 shirt. He was so ready, and he was so disappointed.
My Bite of 87 shirt 3 sizes too small, so my belly's hanging out like Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. No, I put it on my list too because that kind of like manufactured children's horror is just kind of gross to me. It's just cheeseburgers for kids, and it's not sustaining. It's just made for I think the wrong reasons, and it's just it's a bummer. It's a bummer too because like Jim Henson's like studio is tethered to it also, and I just it's whatever.
And their work was good. We did talk about that on our episode. Their work is the best part of the movie. It's frankly too high quality for the quality of the film. And I like I said, I'll reiterate what I said on that episode is that like I feel weird complaining about Five Nights at Freddy's because like I'm so not the target demographic, but I did really have a horrible time watching it. It's on my list too, just lower. It
made $1 bajillion at the box office, so we're inevitably gonna get another 5 of these movies, but
another reason to resent it.
Hopefully we'll be spared for next year at least.
Yeah, I don't think just because we get 5 more of them doesn't necessarily mean we need to talk about them on the podcast.
Yeah, I think we talked about that in the episode before too. Yeah, we can miss it after this.
Anyway, my number 3 is Renfield. We don't need to rehash that. We just talked about it. Cleve, you said your 3 was Five Nights. So Ben, what's your number 2?
Yeah, so my number 2 is a movie we didn't cover on the podcast, but was thoroughly disappointing to me nonetheless. That was Christopher Landon's new movie, made for Netflix, We Have a Ghost. Christopher Landon,
Yeah, that did not look
obviously
good.
the same guy who directed Happy Death Day and Freaky. I was excited about this. We had predicted this last year, I think, and it got delayed and didn't come out until this year. Essentially, the premise is a family moves into a house, and the kid discovers that the house is haunted by the ghost of Ernest Borgnine. But in this movie, it's not actually Ernest Borgnine. It's just a ghost named Ernest, played by David Harbour, the dude from Stranger Things.
Weird.
And yeah, it's just a shitty Netflix family horror movie. Very light on the horror, very light on the fun, very light on good dialogue. Yeah, just not a good movie.
Yeah, I saw the trailer and said nope, and that's why I didn't watch it. And I'm glad we didn't cover it on the podcast because it looked fucking terrible. And speaking of Christopher Landon, he's also in the fucking driver's seat for the new Scream movie for Scream 7, or what now sounds like it's going to be a Scream reboot because they've lost both of their protagonists. So yeah, good things slated ahead for Christopher Landon, I think. My number 2 is Five Nights. We already talked about that. I hated it. It was bad. I had a bad time. Cleve, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is one, much like Ben, we didn't actually cover on the podcast, and I'm pretty confident neither of y'all have seen, but it was the most recent Children of the Corn remake.
Correct.
Oh,
I've not seen that.
So I forgot I watched it, and we'll say before the podcast, I was scrolling through just movies that had come out this year, looking for like my bests and worsts of, trying to catch any cracks that maybe I didn't catch on the podcast, and it came back up, and I was just suddenly like shocked by a bunch of memories I'd forgotten, and it was like seeing a photograph of an old turd. I was just like, oh, ugh. It's rough. The most unfortunate thing about it for me is that it is still currently the only Children of the Corn I've seen.
Bro, even the original is trash. I don't think you're missing anything. Even the first
here, like, it's so silly. But this one is unforgivably cheap, terrible. The plot is rough. The way that the children operate is it's insane. It's not. It almost feels like it's not written by a person. It's so devoid of thought or care or giving a shit. Terrible movie.
Everything you've just said also applies to the original one, just for what it's worth.
That's really funny.
So it's continuing the tradition.
Yes, you get the impression that no one really on the production cared. The epitome of really just doing it for a job. There was one great thing that came out of it, and that was a joke, and that's because at the end of the film, who fucking cares if I spoil it? There is a big corn monster that the children summon, and or just kind of shows up. In this case, and in this,
Cleve, that's he who walks behind the rose. Sure.
I don't think they ever say that in this one, but so even the poetry is really gone. Maybe they do. Who knows? I got it. It was so hardly memorable. But in this, it's a really bad like CG corn creature, and not the fun kind of bad CG, but it looks almost like a corn mech, and so we dubbed it the Decepticorn, and that's the best thing that came out of that movie is the Decepticorn. It's both offensive and not memorable all at once. It's a weird one, and so yeah, I had to put it there.
Well, speaking of offensive and not memorable, I have a feeling that all of our number 1 is the same.
I would be shocked if it wasn't.
Yeah.
Should we all say it at once? 1, 2, 3. Exorcist Believer. Yeah. Good job, class.
Boo this movie. Boo. We did a whole
Boo.
It makes my head hurt talking about it and thinking about it. We did a whole episode about it. I don't want to belabor it too much.
Yeah,
you guys can talk.
Yeah.
It's David Gordon Green and company. It's totally shitting on the legacy of the original. It's a movie that is both bad in its own right and also offensive to the legacy of the original film, and also, much like you're describing Children of the Corn, immensely forgettable. I remember very few actual specifics from this movie, other than just a general feeling of frustration and sort of ambient disgust.
Yeah, well, I do want to say one thing I find interesting about it is, I think it really reflects the particular state big budget horror and legacy horror IP is in 2023, because they keep trying to go back to the well of old stuff, and it turns out unless you have a good idea for that stuff, it's going to be dog shit.
And yet, this is the same year that we got a good Evil Dead movie and a good Saw movie. So there's something to be there's another end of that spectrum. But
monkey's paws, curling fingers. What I will say about this film is, unlike Utis, who didn't find it memorable, this movie found its way into my spine, into my very nervous system. I think for the rest of my life, much like Zuzu, when I feel pain or discomfort, I will just tether that to flashes of this film. It's in my blood, and it will never go. I just have to make with it.
It's gonna be like those people who do too many psychedelics, and then they crack their back and get a little mini trip off of it. It's like you're gonna crack your back and just get a flood of memories of Exorcist Believer.
But far less pleasurable. Yeah, I'll be in the shower and I'll just be on my knees crying, and I won't know why. It'll be because of that movie. Yeah.
Well, The Exorcist Believer is the worst film of the year.
Unanimously.
Do y'all have any dishonorable mentions?
Dishonorable mentions? Not really. There's some others that I feel like I'm gonna mention in the poddies that were not terrible, but sort of just outside my bottom 5. So I'll save that.
I have 2 that we didn't cover on the podcast that I just wanted to quickly mention. The first one being 65. Has to be the worst title of the year.
Oh, if that counts, I'd throw that on there too. Ditto that. Yeah. Good
cut. And the other one, it was The Blackening. When the trailer was going around in the theater, I thought this looked fun. Turns out it's just kind of a shitty, low-effort comedy. Disappointing.
All right. Well, are we ready to turn the tables and talk about the good stuff?
Yes, let's do it.
Well, Ben, what's your number 5? You start us off again.
All right, I'll talk to you with my number 5. Talk to me. I found this to be an awesome debut from Raka Raka, with a really great lead performance, some genuinely scary sequences, and just great pacing and tone throughout. Really confidently made. One of my biggest surprises of the year. Just a great overall movie. That's my number 5.
Yeah, agreed. Really strong debut. And there's already a sequel coming soon, so we'll see if this is the new Conjuring verse. But this is I will just add on to that and mention that this felt distinctly like Zoomer horror. And I was surprised how good and fresh and fun it was, and like you said, also pretty scary. My number 5 is a film that we did not cover on the podcast, but I'd like to at some point. It's a film that Ben recommended to me and said, you got to make sure you watch this before end of year, and I'm glad I did. It's When Evil Lurks, an Argentinian horror film. I won't get too into it in terms of spoilers, but just one of the most genuinely like nasty and cruel movies that I've seen in a really long time. Like very nihilistic, very mean-spirited, and horribly violent, and certainly not recommended for people who have trouble seeing violence against children, particularly, because this movie is really unflinching in that. But it's also
It really
well
says,
made.
"Fuck them kids."
Really says "fuck them kids," but it's really well made, very well paced and acted, incredible practical effects. The gore is just like outstanding, and I feel like it was also a sort of fresh and interesting take on like a demonic possession story that I hadn't seen before. So it's on Shudder. Would definitely recommend checking it out, and we'll probably cover it on the pod at some point.
My number 5 is a film that I thought was conceptually genius. I thought it's one of the best ideas for a horror film you could come up with. I think in that sense it feels like it was made for me. Though in execution, I did not have a good time watching it. Unlike The Outwaters, it's an indie film that I think does, with some time, I think it does deserve the talk around it. And I hope the creators go on to make more work. And I do, just to round out the year, I do wish all the people around the film the best. And that's Skinamarink.
Wait,
Wow.
Skinamarink didn't even make it into my top 5, and I actually liked the movie. How is it? I thought it was for sure going to be in your bottom 5.
Because again, I hated the experience of watching the film. However, the idea of a home being spirited into the void by a malevolent spirit that sort of preys on these young children is the perfect film to me. Like, it is, on paper, it is just such a cool film. And while I didn't enjoy the experience of watching the film, as the film has sort of washed over me, and I've enjoyed the material, like a lot of the media around Skinamarink, I've just come to accept that like the movie, though I didn't enjoy the film, it had a very positive impact on me, and it reminded me of a lot of things that I love and enjoy, and that's spooky face shit, which is just my jam. I have to put it at 5, and I think that, you know, with some differences, it would be number 1 for me.
Well, I'll be damned. Maybe
I
there's hope
had a
for it.
terrible time watching
genuinely
it.
shocked.
I still have to respect it and put it at 5.
I am too. I'm genuinely surprised by that, because again, like Skinamarink is going to be one of my honorable mentions. Like, I liked it a lot, but it didn't make it into my top 5. So like to hear it on yours is very surprising. And I don't know. I'm gonna call my shot like Babe Ruth. We'll say give it 2 or 3 years, and I think you're gonna be a full on Skinamarink-y head. I think you're gonna have a full turn on it.
Here's my
I think you're
my
gonna
last
recognize its
little.
greatness.
Sorry, I'm going to take a little more time just to talk about this one point, and that is in respect to analog horror. I spent a good chunk of time this year delving into analog horror, whether it's the Mandela Catalog or the Monument Mythos, all these pieces. But I, for the most part, dug into them via this YouTuber Wendigoon's channel, and he treats them like campfire stories, where he just breaks them down and he talks about them to you with love, because he loves those series. And it feels like you're with you're with a friend, and he's telling you about this scary event. And then I went back and I watched the Mandela Catalog and I watched the rest, and I didn't like him near as much. And I liked the content he put out for them more than I liked the actual art, because I prefer that medium. Skinamarink I did in reverse. I saw the film and then I watched his video on it, and it brought me around in some respects. But I think I enjoy his video about Skinamarink more than I enjoy Skinamarink itself.
Well, we'll take what we can get, won't we, folks?
That's right.
Ben, what's your number 4?
Let's keep the Skinamarink praise going, because it's my number 4.
Boy, let's fucking go.
Yeah, it's genuinely rare that you find a movie with this wide of a theatrical release using such an experimental approach. It feels like a foreign language in a lot of respects in terms of like structure and style and approach to filmmaking. But I find that so refreshing and so original. I found it to be one of the most evocative and immersive experiences I've had in the theater probably since Climax a few years back. It's genuinely horrifying. It captures a childhood kind of anxiety and aimlessness and kind of fear in a way that I've never quite seen translated before. And I think it works because it, again, uses such an original syntax to how it tells its story. Yeah, just an incredible movie. And I agree. I think it's one of those movies that's only going to grow in legacy as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Even though it didn't make it into my top 5, I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. One of the most like genuinely haunting films that I've seen this year that like really stuck with me in a meaningful way, like long after we saw it. In a way that like most of the movies on my top 5 did not like have a lasting impression the way that Skinamarink did. So well deserving. My number 4 is Talk to Me. We already talked about it. Very good film, exciting debut. I'm excited to see more. Yeah, fun, interesting, fresh, haunting movie. Cleve, what's your number 4?
For my number 4, I was torn because it was important that I put Skinamarink on that list. So I was sort of debating Talk to Me and this other film. I think that Talk to Me is a better movie. However, the joy that I continue to get out of the Pope's Exorcist made just it. I had to put it on. I'm sorry. I know it's not anywhere near as good of a film as Talk to Me. But I don't care. I every time I think about Fat Russell Crowe on a Vespa toddling his way all the way to Spain, it's really funny to me. Putting the spirit in the pig's head and then shooting it with a shotgun out of nowhere. It's just such a dude's rock movie, and I love it. I love that movie. So yeah, Pope's Exorcist for number 4. It's a stupid pick. I don't care.
Fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Get some really wild polls this year. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Ben, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Eli Roth is back, baby. Thanksgiving was such a fucking awesome movie. I loved every minute of it. It's the most genuinely exploitation-y movie we've seen since probably Piranha, right? I had a fucking blast in it. All the kills were great. It perfectly nails that kind of horror comedy tone. Just all around awesome movie.
Thanksgiving was gonna be my number 5 until I saw When Evil Lurks, and it bumped it into 6. So I'm glad it's getting some recognition because yeah, Thanksgiving was fun, genuinely like fun, inventive holiday slasher that I liked way more than I was expecting to going in.
Wasn't afraid to get brutal as fuck either.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean that's sort of par for the course with Eli Roth. I was expecting that.
That Black Friday sequence is so well shot. Like it definitely like a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like so many of the kills in that are so fucking good. Definitely a film worth saying. Probably the best Thanksgiving horror movie that exists.
In a lot of respects, it's the best Scream movie we got this year too, considering how shitty Scream 6 was.
True.
That is quite similar.
It's a lot of those high school horror tones.
Yeah.
What's that?
All right, my number 3 is Beau is Afraid, from Ari Aster. This was a very divisive one amongst a lot of people this year. I think we all really enjoyed it. But a Ari Aster sort of blank check movie after the success of Hereditary and Midsommar that he uses to tell a lengthy, sprawling, self-indulgent, strange sort of odyssey of a story that I thought was fucking great. Has some of the absolutely most memorable sequences of any movie I've seen this year. The part where he's in the bathtub and he looks up and the dude is like Spider-Manning on like in the ceiling above him with this look of utter terror on his face. Like I still think about that all the time. The whole like the whole first act of that movie, like all the stuff around his apartment building is just like some of the most brilliant filmmaking I saw this year. I really loved it, despite its sort of like meandering and you could say maybe stylistically inconsistent story, but I loved it a lot.
I love the tone of Beau's Afraid. It's like such a pitch black comedy with the absurdism of something like I Think You Should Leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Cleve, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is I'm pretty confident we just flipped ours. My number 3 is Infinity Pool. I mean, it was so good. Like I love
just
the
rewatched
interplay
it last
with
night.
identity. Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the interplay with identity. Mia Goth is just she's so good, man. Yeah, it's another Cronenberg Jr. Hit. I think it's 3 for me because I don't think it's going to be Cronenberg Jr.'s like magnum opus. I still think his best work so far is Possessor. I think if I had to choose between the two, but Infinity Pool is incredible.
My toxic trait is that I want Mia Goth from Infinity Pool to ruin my life.
I was gonna say Mia Goth's performance in that movie is just so good. Yeah, that movie didn't make my top 5, but it's definitely in the honorable mentions. What a unique and awesome movie.
All right, well, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Beau is Afraid.
Hey,
nice.
Yeah, like I said, it's such a wonderful pitch black comedy. It effortlessly merges like thorough darkness in with this humor, to the point where it feels very deliberately cruel at times, in a way that I really loved. Actually, there's a mean streak through this movie. That's really fun to watch. There's so many good bits.
It is somehow a 3-hour film that left me wanting more. How you do that? I want more of that movie. I keep wanting to go back to watch it, but when do I have 3 hours? It's the problem. So it's tricky, but I want to show it to more people. Yeah, that movie just put me in a really silly, special place, and I really appreciate it. I think it's a rare thing that a filmmaker is given a budget to make something like so fucking insane like that. And also like full credit to Joaquin Phoenix's performance is spectacular. He is so good, and you truly believe that he is just anxious and concerned about everything, to the point where it's ruining him and his life.
Between Beau is Afraid and Napoleon, Joaquin's had a big year of getting to be a weird, asocial little freak.
Yeah, well, he's just had a run of that. I mean, the fucking Joker and all the. I mean, it's what he's best at, really. Like he's just so good at being.
He's becoming typecast, isn't he? It kind of is his deal. Well, my number 2. This actually works out perfectly because my number 2, I'm pretty confident is both of y'all's number 1, which is a film that we did not talk about. We did not have a chance to cover on the podcast because it came out very recently. But Godzilla -1.
Yes, that is my number 1.
What a fucking movie!
It's seriously like I walked out of the movie and said I didn't realize that Godzilla movies could be this good. And I think this movie deserves a full episode from us at some point, probably soon. Because there is just so much to talk about, but it's just like such a remarkable blending of like the traditional origins of Godzilla, but also like it feels modern and fresh. despite its period setting. It's the best fucking Godzilla has looked probably ever. And there's a human story that I actually care about, that is like emotionally rich and powerful, and something that my biggest problem with the American legendary Godzilla movies are just, I just do not give a shit about the human characters. And in this one I really did. Yeah, it just fucking knocked my socks off.
One of the things I really like about this movie is, even though it is an origin film, like they're going back to the beginning of Godzilla, it is an origin film that focuses not on the origin of Godzilla, like the creature. It's an origin to the spirit of the films, and an incredible way to talk about the zeitgeist surrounding those films and what those movies mean with large scale destruction. It's a fucking banger, man, and an incredible war film, and it was just, yeah, it's I think that movie is going to be very special to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, somehow we got the best Jaws movie we've ever seen in the last 50 years.
The best Jaws movie since Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. With the Godzilla movie. Like, it's crazy to look at Godzilla -1 and compare it to like the slate of action blockbusters from America, because outside of like a handful of big IPs, this movie completely outclasses the whole lot of them.
It's like
Go
a
ahead.
real movie.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's such a real movie. Like it does such a great job of paying homage to just classic films in general, and to the degree where it just is one itself. Like, and yeah, that's hard to do, man. Like, it's not aping it. Like, it always does it with like such clear intent, and it's rare to see. At least for me, like I don't see too many World War II films like from the Japanese perspective, and for it to be like a perspective of the people. Yeah, it was incredibly refreshing, and I think a film that needed to be made, and I needed to see. It was important that I did. That's special.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's genuinely emotional at times. The whole finale sequence, it's getting a little dusty in the theater, boys. I don't know about
yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, my eyes were watering a little bit because all the dust.
Well, my number one was Disney's Haunted Mansion. I thought sorry, I was sitting on that joke. No, it's -1. -1 is my number one.
Yeah, my number one is Infinity Pool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, we already talked a little bit about it, but I mean, just like stellar performances from Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård. Just like this really dark, psychedelic trip into the destruction of the human spirit and humanity. And I really loved it. Yeah, I don't know if it's my favorite Brandon Cronenberg. I need to revisit Possessor. But it's of equal quality in my mind for sure. But yeah, well, that's our top 5 of the year. You want to do some honorable mentions of stuff that didn't quite squeak in there?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I'll shout out a few non-horror things, particularly non-horror sequences of some of my favorite movies of the year. For example, John Wick 4, the whole long stair sequence in that movie, as well as the bird's eye overhead sequence while he's going through the big building. Just phenomenal. Some of the best action cinematography I've seen all of this year. Such an awesome movie. The kind of self-reflexive radio finale with Scorsese in Killers of the Flower Moon, that weirdly got me. It was just really raw and emotional in a really personal way. I don't feel like we've ever seen from Scorsese quite in that way. I want to mention the little car in Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, part 1. I guess it's just Dead Reckoning now because they're not doing a part 2. But yeah, that sequence was a fucking blast. Really inventive and fun. Reminded me a lot of like old Jackie Chan stuff like Tokyo Story. Tom Cruise still has the juice, man. And the last one I wanted to touch on is the scene in the Dungeons and Dragons movie from this year where Chris Pine loses his disguise self spell.
Oh yeah, his illusion spell falls apart.
Yeah, one
For
of
me,
those.
it's
very
all
funny.
with that D&D film. It was how so many scenes started with a little Muppet creature in the corner that crawls out of the shot or something. Like there's so many incredible puppets and practical, real things you can reach out and touch in a family-oriented action film. Like, oh God, it's just so nice to see. Like that real movies are still getting made from time to time. Like, thank God.
Some honorable mentions that I have, just some horror ones that didn't quite make the top but are worth mentioning. Stuff like Mithrigan, thought was really fun from earlier this year. Evil Dead
Yeah.
Rise, Saw 10, both solid, fun entries in their franchise. The Outwaters, of course, despite how much Cleveland hates it, I think deserves to be spoken about in the same breath as Skinamarink. Maybe not quite as effective, but definitely still worth checking out if those types of movies are your jam. But honestly, man, the majority I feel like of my like actual like top 10 movies this year with like non-horror stuff you've already mentioned, Ben, like John Wick 4 and Killers of the Flower Moon is probably my favorite film this year, period. But also really liked Oppenheimer a lot. How to Blow Up a Pipeline was incredible. Mission Impossible, like you already mentioned, Dead Reckoning. Creed 3 was a lot of fun. David Fincher's new movie, The Killer, was really good. Just a lot of like, this was, I don't know if this was like necessarily a great year for horror, but like, this is a good year for movies.
I do have two, actually, both of which I saw this week. Maybe I'm a little hot on them, but I do think that I will. These are the kind of film that I think will age quite well with me with time. One, Boy and the Heron. If you're a fan of animated films, you should see it. It's in theaters if you can. It's a great Miyazaki Studio Ghibli film. I think that they did a phenomenal job of paying almost homage to themselves. It's a beautiful love letter to the studio, and because there are just so many sequences throughout the film that are just with elements peppered through their other works, largely spirited away, but there's little touches of Mononoke, there's little touches of Howl's Moving Castle, there's little touches of their best work, and it stands really strongly for that. Also, Robert Pattinson just disappears into that Heron role. He's so fucking good. And lastly, and most importantly to me, I think the best piece of art that I took in this year that I enjoyed was a series on HBO called Scavenger's Reign. It's Annihilation-esque with the application of Mobius. If you don't know what those words mean, you should please look them up. Yeah, Scavenger's Reign is phenomenal. It is a really cool piece that uses xenobiology to explore like the self and what that means and change. And that's why I think it's also very akin to Annihilation, is that sort of loss of self in an alien world and what that means. I could not recommend it stronger. Yeah, best thing I saw this year.
Yeah, Scavenger's Reign whips ass. I know I recommended it a couple of times at the end of other episodes. Definitely the best show I saw this year for sure. Well, we need to keep rolling along because we've still got a lot to do. We gotta give out our annual Poddy Awards. Now how this works, if you haven't heard one of these episodes before, is Ben has come up with a number of categories split up into new 2023 movies and then just movies that we covered on the show this year, old or new. And for each category, we'll each bring one nomination, and then we'll decide which one of those three wins the award. So, without further ado, let's fucking do it.
We'll start with the 2023 categories. This one is Best Cinematography. Cleve, I think you might hate me for this one, but my nomination for Best Cinematography is Skinamarink.
Ooh.
Well, I'm glad you love images of the tops of door frames, Ben.
Well, okay, look, like I was saying in my, kind of roundup for this movie, it uses a film language that's very foreign to most moviegoers' sensibility. And I understand that that's very inaccessible to a lot of people. However, I think the way it's shot and the selection of shots it uses is so specific and tactical, to the point that it really kind of, again, immerses you into this atmosphere of the movie.
My nomination is Infinity Pool. It's a good looking movie. I like the way it looks.
My nomination is Beau is Afraid. It's a good looking movie. I like the
Oh.
way it looks. I know earlier you described Beau is Afraid as almost disparate, like it's all this. I found it to be a feast. Each scene does almost feel like a different film, and I think it adds to the anxiety of it, and you know, and the odyssey of it as well. Like the Cyclops' cave is very different from the Sirens, is very different from Scylla and Charybdis, is very different from, you know, all the rest, and I like that about it. So yeah, I'm giving it to Beau because it's just it's a panoply of cool fucking weird shots that give you the agita.
Well, all right. We've
So-
got three very different films. How do we want to resolve this one?
I'm
Anybody
willing.
not
I'm
gonna
willing
explain.
to let Skinamarink go. I know Cleve wasn't a fan, and I think we're all a fan of Infinity Pool and Beau's Afraid. So one of those, I think
So
personally.
you're the decider then.
I would lean towards Beau is Afraid personally.
Okay.
It's a tough call between the two, but there's so much inventiveness there, especially in like the city anxiety sequence. Just phenomenal.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that. Congratulations, Beau is Afraid, on your Poddy Award for Best Cinematography.
All right, next is Best Score. And I'll let one of y'all start with the nominations. Cleve.
I have a weird poll, not an uncommon poll. We were just talking about it, but I had to sit and think because when it comes to standout scores this year, I was a little pickled, puzzled, perplexed. I was sitting there thinking, like, you know, like there wasn't really necessarily a score that stood out to me. The next thing I defaulted to was sound design and vibes from a movie. And I think the film that has the score that enhances the movie's vibes the most, like that pairs the best with the shots, is Infinity Pool. The industrial sounds like make you feel disillusioned and lost
I mean,
in the stealth. Like, it's great.
It's a Tim Hecker score, so it's like, yeah, Infinity Pool is also mine. Oh, okay, technically I had two, because I wasn't sure whether we were keeping it to films that we covered on the show or just movies in general. So for ones we covered on the show is Infinity Pool. So I'm fine going towards that one. But I think my actual favorite score of the year is Godzilla -1.
Oh no!
Such a good job, like bringing something fresh, but also like, man, a couple of times they just hit you with the fucking classic, like 50s Toho Godzilla score, like when he's coming out of the water, like onto land, bum 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 bum. Like it's fucking killer, man.
It's
so,
great. It's iconic.
Yeah, I might.
I kind of
I
cheated.
completely agree. Yeah.
I kind of cheated by picking both of those, but
my pick was kind of a left field one. I was a little stumped on best score personally, much like Cleve. I went with Mithrigan, just because the scenes of her singing are so
really
funny.
fun.
I don't think that hangs in comparison to Infinity Pool or Godzilla -1, so I'll leave that up to y'all.
Do we just want to give it to both?
I mean, we already gave like -1 our universal best film of the year.
I mean, Infinity Pool was mine, so like.
I just keep thinking about that shot. It's like the very end of Infinity Pool when he's just looking out at the rain. It's just, I find that to be incredibly, like, a really moving piece.
Do we want to say Tim Hecker Infinity Pool then?
I do.
Yeah,
I think
let's
I do.
go. Let's go for it.
All right. Congrats, Tim Hecker. If you want to come onto the show and accept your award next year, we'd be glad to have you.
Quick shout out to Beau's Afraid's soundtrack too.
Yeah.
I don't think
I put a little question mark next to score when I was first putting my stuff together.
Yeah.
Did Hacks and Cloak do that one too? I know he did
Yeah,
Midsummer.
yeah,
Okay.
he did.
I'd forgotten
I
that.
don't think it was quite as memorable as Midsummer's
No,
score,
it was
but
not.
still pretty good.
All right. Well, what do we got next?
All right, so next is best performance. Tease, why don't you kick this one off?
Well, to keep on the Infinity Pool train, it's Mia Goth in Infinity Pool.
I too. Yeah, we already talked about it. She's so good. What was it? A little like a sucky baby. What does she say? It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, she calls him a little sucky baby.
It's so good.
Baby. Yeah. Like that scene where she is on the hood of the car, driving slowly in front of him, eating fried chicken out of a bucket and drinking white wine is iconic.
Reading his bad reviews for his book.
Like I don't like to
Yeah.
use the word iconic with modern lingo, but it really is. It really
Just
is.
like honestly though, just like the range of that performance, where she can go from being like so understated and like seductive and quiet, and then just like totally explode and become like complete psycho. Like just her control over that range is so good. Ben, did you have a different nomination? Or
yeah, I had Joaquin and Beau's Afraid.
That would have been my second. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mia Goth has this. That was my second. It was right below here.
I think
so
this is
we'll definitely go with that.
I think this is 2 years in a row that Mia Goth has gotten best performance Poddy on this podcast. Because last year I'm pretty sure we gave it. I'm pretty sure we gave it to her last year for the dual X and Pearl roles as well.
Sure we did.
Yeah.
We stand.
Congrats, Mia Goth, reigning champ 2 years in a row.
The two other performances I wanted to touch on quick are Sophie Wilde in Talk to Me. Thought her performance was really good. And of course, our man, Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Dude's rock. All right, what's the next one?
All right, next is scariest sequence. I had a few ideas bouncing around in my head, but the one that really stuck with me that I found genuinely the creepiest was the finale of The Outwaters. The whole last 15 minutes or so. It's super atmospheric and abstract and disturbing. The sound design's great. The monster is great.
I think that's going to be a tough sell with Cleve.
I'm putting a big thumbs down.
My my pick is the look under the bed sequence from Skinamarink. Just one of a number of pretty horrifying, scary, tense scenes in that movie. I will say I don't love that it just ends with a kind of like unrelated jump scare, but I think just like the pacing of that whole scene of the little girl going into the room and seeing like the dad sitting there and him telling her to look under the bed, and just like that anticipation of waiting for something that ultimately is not there is just like, that's just like the probably the fastest my heart was beating during any movie we watched this year.
I think coming fresh, hot, and angry off of that movie, even then on that podcast episode, I agreed that scene was really effective and powerful. What I settled on for scariest sequence to me was the eternal death of Kevin from Skinamarink. So, yeah, Skinamarink in that case.
Yeah,
I know that's
I can go for that. A couple other ones I wanted to mention is the little brother seance and Talk to Me. Genuinely took me by surprise. And non-potty movie, but one that was on Teese's top 5, the dog scene from When Evil Lurks.
Yeah, I'd say do not elaborate on that.
No.
But I know what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. That moment had my fucking jaw on the floor. I could not believe they did that.
Yeah. All right, so next is hottest mess.
I'd be surprised if it was anything other than Exorcist Believer. It's just, hot shit. Not the good kind. It is a mess. It doesn't know what it's trying to say, and it fails in every way, and it somehow, I think, comes out insulting everybody, which is almost comical if I didn't find it so personally egregious. So yeah, hottest mess is Exorcist Believer for me.
There are a lot of contenders for this one. I actually chose Scream 6 because when I think of like a hot mess, I tend to think like convoluted, where there's like a lot of string all over the place that is, hard to kind of piece together. And as much as I hate The Exorcist Believer and think that it's a fucking dog shit movie, I think Scream 6 is more convoluted and frustrating in that way. So that's why I chose it for hottest mess. But Renfield, also a great contender. Five Nights at Freddy's, also a great contender.
Even The Pope's Exorcist, to an extent, would be a good contender.
Fact, also true.
Hot Mess said with love, yeah.
Yeah, personally, my pick was Exorcist Believer as well. The only big reason why it kind of went over the edge beyond like your Scream 6 or Renfield is the amount of money it cost them to buy the Exorcist IP, and this is what they did with it.
Fair point. Very fair point. I will more than happily give y'all this one and say we can give it to Exorcist Believer. So congrats, Exorcist Believer, on your hottest mess award.
All right, next category is most overrated. Tease, why don't you start this one?
Sure. So this was the only other one where I have two picks, one that we covered on the show and one that we didn't. For the one that we covered on the show, Cocaine Bear, I feel like that it was fine, but like it was tonally kind of messy. The whole last 20 minutes is so dark you can barely tell what's going on. Like, I don't know. It's like the trailer, the premise became such a meme that the actual movie didn't even come close to like delivering on for me. That like, even though I don't hate Cocaine Bear and would even consider watching it again at some point, I do think that like it did not even come close to living up to the hype that was set. But my other pick, the one that we did not cover on the podcast, but what I truly think is the most overrated film of the year, is No One Will Save You. I know that we've all seen it, even though we didn't get a chance to talk about it on the show. But that movie came out and everyone's like, ooh, this is Hulu, straight to Hulu. This is this year's Prey. This is this year's like sort of out of nowhere movie that nobody sees coming, and it just fucking blows your goddamn tits off. And like, it was fine, man. Like it was okay, but like, I don't know, the lack of dialogue felt like nothing more than a gimmick. The movie didn't demand it. Totally unsubtle. It has a really interesting premise of like a alien home invasion. I think that's cool. I think they blow their load on that way too quick, and so much of the movie is just like CG alien fights. I don't know, man. It's just like I don't understand the hype around this one. I thought it was all right.
I thought it was pretty good. I certainly didn't think it was this year's Prey. Like, but no. I will say I did. While it was a lot of CG alien, I thought there were some fun new takes on Greys specifically. I like the four-legged walker and a few of the others that's like way taller than you expect, and some of that stuff
it has a lot of conceptually interesting stuff. It certainly does. I just think that like it's overrated in like its execution. I just like, I don't know. I don't get why so many people are like, this is the best, freshest, most exciting new movie of the year.
Yeah, like, certainly wouldn't contend it for overrated.
The dialogue-free stuff was overbaked and kind of gimmicky too, I gotta say.
Yeah. Underbaked, I would say.
So I did originally write Cocaine Bear and then scratch it out, and then to the next of it angrily scribble Outwaters. Ben and Tease, now y'all have a chance to turn down Outwaters for a category, like I did a moment ago. So
yeah, not happening.
There you go.
What you got, Ben?
Yeah. So I honestly went kind of spicy with my overrated pick here. So I went with Evil Dead Rise. I feel like I had really high expectations for it, and it ended up being probably my least favorite Evil Dead movie. I know you guys liked it a little more than I did. I I did jot down 2 others though. I wrote down Scream 6 as well as Ennis Men.
Damn, so none of us are in accord at all on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like I will say, well again, I think we're probably gonna have to, if I had to like give it to Cocaine Bear, because that was my runner-up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like Outwaters, for me, like it's Outwaters only because I watched it, didn't have a good time watching it, and then started hearing all this buzz about how great it was, and I felt like I just watched a different movie than you guys, even still. But yes, no, I think Cocaine Bear was probably, of the films we've just discussed, the one that was talked about the most, that was rated a lot, and I think way overly so. At least Outwaters is like a small indie movie, you know, like Cocaine Bear was a large studio piece, and with a lot of big actors in it and such, and a lot of missed opportunities for it. There are some good sequences in Cocaine Bear, but I think it's overrated.
Yeah, I think Evil Dead Rise is rated, and I think Ennis Men maybe we went into with higher expectations, but like outside of our discussion, we did. Ben and I did. But like outside of our discussion, like the podcast Discord, like I didn't hear anybody say shit about Ennis Men. So it's
you didn't hear anybody with an E.
I think it's hard to say that that's overrated when it's a movie that nobody but us is talking about.
I stand by it. Yeah, because we went into Ennis Men and I said it's going to be art house wank, and we came out and it was art house wank, and a big nothing burger of a movie. But even still, anyway, though, like I didn't put it on any of my low lists or anything else, because Ennis Men, at least,
no, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it really isn't that bad. It's really not.
Ennis Men was fine.
It's almost like kind of like, I think it's a little too bitter and unkind to say it's wank. Even I think that's not really fair to the movie. But
yeah,
I think like it.
Hear our episode on Ennis Men. But it sounds like we're in agreement now that Cocaine Bear wins most overrated of the year.
I think that is the right call.
Yeah. The next category is most underrated. Cleve, you're gonna get a kick out of this because my most underrated was The Outwaters.
Nope.
I agree with you that The Outwaters is underrated. I don't think it's most underrated.
Yeah, I think my most underrated, because it didn't get like the best reviews, and it's just not a very accessible film, especially compared to how much I loved it, is just Beau's Afraid, man. Like
that's mine too. Yep.
Yeah.
That was also mine. Yeah, Beau's Afraid.
Yeah, I think it's a great movie.
A lot of people like really, really hated it. And while I can understand why, kind of, I absolutely think that's they're so wrong. It was the fucking Summer of Beau
movie. Yeah,
they were going in expecting the wrong kind of movie, I think, ultimately.
I think really with Beau's Afraid, if you're going expecting a movie, you're probably not going to have a.
I will say, Outwaters would have been my second pick, though, Ben. I agree with you. I agree with you that it's underrated.
It is, and it feels like a breakout hit in a lot of ways. I don't think it quite gets the respect it deserves. I'm sure over time it'll get more of a cult following. The only other one I wanted to mention here was Mithrigan, just because it came out in January, so I feel like a lot of people have already forgotten about how fucking good Megan was.
I think they have forgotten at this point, but I do think that when Megan came out, people were talking about it. I think that at the time that it was released, it was certainly not underrated. I did consider that one too, though, because Mithrigan was I think more fun than we were anticipating.
All right, so next is Best Kill. This is different. We added this kind of last minute just because there were a lot of memorable sequences and kills that maybe weren't necessarily the scariest, but were noteworthy.
It allows us to separate horror from gore also, because I realized that a lot of my picks across the potties are like gore related, so it was nice that I could like separate that, because like scary sequence should, at least for me personally, I'd rather give it to something that isn't gore related. Originally, before we added this category, this was my scary sequence though, and that is, surprisingly, I sat back and I thought, well, what is a sequence that left me like buzzing the most, that kind of freaked me out? as a kill sequence or as a scary sequence. And surprisingly, it's the one that made my stomach turn the most was the thigh wire cut from Saw X. Like, I got to give it to Socks. That sequence is so nasty and cruel and really, really, really well made. The practicals of like her cutting through her thigh, like you fucking buy it, man. What a horrible way to go. And it's set up with such agitation.
That was on my list as well. Most of the others on my list came from Thanksgiving, as did my eventual
Well
pick,
deserved.
which is the where he kills Tim Dillon in his apartment, where he does stabs him with the turkey carver, then garrots him and cuts his head off in like the super anime way where he's like turns away and like the blood spurts. And then it ends with him feeding the cat before he leaves. That was all of it. I will say, just like Ben mentioned it, I did not choose this because it's a movie we didn't talk about on the podcast, and like Cleveland hasn't seen it, so he can't really vote on it. But like, really, I think the best kill sequence is the dog sequence that Ben mentioned earlier from When Evil Lurks. That was certainly the most jarring.
Most
shame
shocking.
you didn't pick it for your year-end picks, Tease. Real bummer there.
We can talk about it at some point.
Yeah, we should.
But yeah. So the Tim Dillon kill is my actual pick.
Yeah, my pick is a bit of a left field one, but it's the one that took me most by surprise, and I feel like it perfectly nails the tone of the movie, and that's the paint scene in Beau is Afraid, where the sister kills herself by chugging paint. It is both hilarious and incredibly disturbing in a way that I feel like only Beau is Afraid could pull off.
Yeah, that's a good one that I hadn't even considered.
I would say, for me, of the two of your picks, the one that would probably bring me across the table the most is Thanksgiving. Where he garrots the guy and then feeds the cat. I think of like the audience's reaction to that too, and I thought that was delightful when the whole crowd was like, "Whoa!" when he kills him, and then like leading up to the cat, because he looks down at the cat for a second, and I remember a few people in the audience being like, "Don't you fucking dare!" Like, oh, like you could hear it in their voices, and then just a universal sigh and giggle as he feeds the cat and then gives a little pet on the head before leaving. And I think it's like the profane and the sacred. It's got a little bit of all of it. It's salty, sweet. It's a delightful little sequence. And I'd be happy to give it to Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For Thanksgiving, I was honestly torn between that one and the Thanksgiving festival where the dude's head gets caved in.
Oh yeah,
just because it's so brutal.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah, with the boat. The bowsprit comes through the back of the window. Yeah, Jesus Christ. That one's fucking wild. Well, Thanksgiving wins it for kills, whichever one.
Pick.
All right, so that was the last of our new movie categories. One that I don't have listed that I just want to throw out really quick and get your guys' thoughts is best theater experience. I think for me, it was Thanksgiving. Just because that crowd was amazing and everyone was having a good time.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard for me to remember theatrical experiences. I would probably say Thanksgiving as well. Maybe Godzilla -1. Everybody was pretty dialed into that when we went and saw that one. But yeah, I'm happy. Like, everyone was having fun with Thanksgiving. I'm happy to second that as well.
Cool.
Yeah, same.
Sweet. Well, that was all of the new movie categories. So we'll jump in to kind of general movies we covered in this year.
Old and new.
Yes.
We covered this year.
So we'll kick it off with biggest surprise. I would be kind of surprised if you guys didn't feel the same way about this one, but for me, it's obvious. It's Cat's Eye.
It was Cat's Eye for me too.
Yeah, This is a movie I didn't have much knowledge of before, and was blown away with.
Yeah, it's like my new horror. It's like my new favorite horror anthology movie. Like I absolutely did not go into Cat's Eye expecting to come out the other side of it like that. I'm pretty sure we gave it a golden pod. Like that was pretty easily. That was the biggest surprise of the year for me.
Cat's Eye was amazing. I had two others written down, but I'm very happy to give it to Cat's Eye. But I did want to note, because I don't think I note them anywhere else. One surprise to me, because it just sort of came out of left field, was Saloon.
Saloon was cool.
Saloon was great.
Cool. It was really fun. And then also just I didn't know or have much to expect going into Female Prisoner 701 Scorpion, and I was blown out of the fucking water by it and its sequel.
Yeah, those were both on my list as well.
Yeah,
it was one of the best things I saw this year. I thought it was incredible, and I really enjoyed. I'm really glad you picked that to share with us, Ben. So yeah, Female Prisoner was on my list, but I think y'all's is great. Yeah, Cat's Eye for sure.
Next is biggest letdown.
This one was actually pretty easy for me as well. For me, the biggest letdown was The Blob, 1958, as part of our.
It's the same for me. It's the same for me. I, considering it had a Criterion release, I was expecting a little bit more.
Just kind of fucking boring.
It's gonna be beware of The Blob, because y'all are not going to agree with my biggest letdown. I looked at my list, and y'all are not going to agree with this. I looked at my list, and there were a lot of stinkers on there that I hated and made me feel terrible. But on the other turn, this year, I guess I've just been going into films with a healthier mentality and just not going in with that high, with my expectations very high. Because I think to be let down, you have to first be going in with high hopes. Like you have
absolutely.
to. That's a big part, is you have to be up to be let down. And for me, that was Knock Knock. Starting the movie, went in with good spirits, and just throughout the course of the film, I liked it less and less. It's kind of a Greasy Strangler situation where I get that that's the point, but as films, for me, I didn't have a good time watching it, and I don't like the movie. So for me, it was Knock Knock was a letdown. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I was let down by it.
I think you're outvoted on that one.
Yeah, no.
Beware of the blob.
Beware of the blob. And now this time of year, you can sing it to Feliz Navidad.
That's true.
Well, it's funny you mention Knock Knock, because that segues perfectly into our next category, hottest mess.
More than you know.
Which I picked for my nomination, Knock Knock, but in a positive way, because it's a hot mess, and that's part of the reason why I love it.
It was Twilight for me, easily.
Oh, I see. Yeah, Twilight sure is a hot mess. But unfortunately, Tease, I did also pick Knock Knock for hottest mess. I just knock 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 on my list here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a batshit movie. Keanu gives an unhinged performance in it. the funny games-esque torture with Ana de Armas. It's just something else. But I love it for that reason. I mean,
it is kind of messy, but I think there's a lot of intent behind it. It's like, I don't like.
Yeah.
Twilight is just such like a fucking convoluted bullshit, dumb attempt at trying to adapt a fucking teenage Mormon vampire love story. It's just a failure on every level. But we'll give it to Knock Knock.
Yeah, well, no, I agree with you in a lot of respects on Twilight. It's definitely my runner-up. But Knock Knock, just that special secret sauce there. All right, next category is scariest film. Cleve, why don't you start this one?
I have two picks I was really torn on. I'm kind of hoping we get the usual affair where one of y'all also picks one of these two, kind of help make it a decider. First off, it is the eye needle sequence in Opera. I thought like that. It's freaky, it's nasty, and the soundtrack fucking whips during that scene too. So throughout the whole movie, really, like Opera is great. I fucking love Dario Argento. And the other one is the hospital scene from The Blob, the '80s Blob. Because that or any sequence from The Blob. so fucking great. So one of
Yeah,
those.
I kind of oscillated back and forth. Like I was gonna say The Blob for a while. It's tough when you're talking about like scariest movie overall because I think that like the most of the kill sequences in The Blob are some of the most like horrifying stuff I've seen. But like a lot of that movie is pretty goofy, so like it's also hard to say that like the movie itself is scary. I ended up going with Talk to Me because I thought just like in terms of its vibe and just like several very specific sequences, like it's just sort of like the eeriest and most atmospheric movie. Skinamarink also a good one. So I'm kind of on the fence, like, but if it moves us in the direction of consensus, like I would be fine giving it to The Blob. Curious to hear what Ben's got.
My nomination was something we covered recently, and that's Haze, just because how visceral the horror in it is, how tactile it is. It affected me in a way that most other movies don't.
I know that Tease also said The Blob. However, fuck man, that sequence in Haze is really good. Yeah, I could give it to Blob or Haze. Let's
go with Haze then.
All right.
I'm happy to give it to an underdog.
All right, so next, the worst movie we covered this year.
Yeah, because we all know what it is.
Easy, yeah. It's Twilight. It's Twilight.
More than Exorcist Believer?
Yes, more than Exorcist Believer. It's Twilight.
Yeah, I think it's Twilight too.
I would watch Exorcist Believer 3 times in a row before I would watch Twilight again once.
Really? Yes. Really? Like I just see the thing about it for me is like I think like from a filmmaking perspective, yes, I think Twilight is a worse film. I get where you're coming from. Spiritually, I hate Exorcist Believer more. I
don't know, man.
It is. They took something that is truly like a sacred film in the history of film, and they made it profane. They fucked it up, and I think that's worse than just making a terrible film. But I will concede and give it to Twilight if we feel the need.
Where are you at, Ben?
Yeah, I said Twilight as well.
Okay.
The only reason is I feel like we gave Exorcist its negative props already. Not to say it's ineligible, but Twilight also needs a mark next to it.
It would be second place for me overall, but yeah, I had a bad time with Exorcist Believer, but like watching Twilight is probably the most miserable I've ever been, like doing something for this show in all 6 years that we've been doing this. Like I really, really, truly had a bad time with that. So it's unparalleled bad experience for me.
All right, so next, let's get into the best movies we covered this year. My best for the year, I had a hard time. There were a lot of good ones.
This is a tough one.
But I ultimately went with RoboCop. It's hard to beat an ultimate classic like RoboCop. It's just a perfectly crafted movie. Easily one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, this one was really hard because we talked about a number of like my favorite films ever made this year, and I think that there's pretty stiff competition, and that like really it could be anything from like fucking RoboCop, Videodrome. I ended up going with Dead Ringers. Just because it's just like one of my all-time favorite Cronenbergs, and I just love it so much. I love Jeremy Irons' performance, but I mean, it's RoboCop is right there alongside. So what did you have, Cleve? And then we can decide which one to actually give it to.
Yeah. I mean, honorably, like I had to jot down. I think the best film that we covered this year is probably just The Exorcist.
Probably, yeah. That one is up there as well.
On paper, academically, it's the best film. Then next for me is Perfect Blue.
Another one.
Yeah.
I think that is Perfect Blue is also a perfect film. However, at the end of the day, truest to myself, and I think just truest to the spirit of the podcast, as Ben already said, I've been known to say it many, many times myself, and that is RoboCop is a perfect fucking film. It has the perfect array of characters, the perfect plot, It's the best Christ film. It captures the metaphor of the phoenix and regaining humanity. It's the best telling of Frankenstein. It is the best of so many things. It captures the beating, bleeding heart of America, and it is aged like the finest goddamned wine. Yeah, RoboCop, RoboCop, RoboCop. I love that movie so much.
Well, I'd buy that for $1.
I'd buy that for $1. I like it.
RoboCop it is then. Happy to concede on that one. RoboCop fucking whips ass.
Hell yes. Okay, so we have 2 final bonus categories. We can hit these fairly quick, I think. So coolest dude. New or old movies we covered for this year. Who do you think was the coolest dude in a movie? This doesn't have to be a man per se. This could be a lady. But coolest dude is a generalized, non-gendered term here.
So before we actually started recording, my pick for this was Roddy Piper in They Live. But I'm actually going to change it because Cleveland, I think this may shock y'all a little bit, but Cleveland actually did a really good job of convincing me who the actual coolest dude in a movie we saw this year was earlier. And it is Russell Crowe in The Pope's Exorcist. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit ashamed to say, but that is the coolest. That is the coolest dude in a movie that we saw this year. The shit with the Vespa, him riding his Vespa from the Vatican all the way to Spain is so funny. Yeah, he just has like unlimited swag.
I am in 100% the same boat as you, Tease. I had written down Roddy Piper because that's what my mind was telling me, but my heart is telling me Russell Crowe. So
it's funny. I first wrote down Russell Crowe because I think that is the right answer there. But I did want to touch too on if it's of all the movies we watched this year, Kurtwood Smith as Clarence J. Boddicker in RoboCop is
a cool
cooler
dude
than he has any right to be.
Yes.
Like you've got the bit where he first kills Peter Weller as with the with the shotgun, like panning across him, and you've got of course the iconic. I don't think Russell Crowe ever says anything as cool in Pope's Exorcist as "bitches leave." Like that's just one of the best lines in movie history. And
so good.
Yeah, Kurtwood Smith is so fucking good in RoboCop. I think he's probably the coolest dude, but I think we should still give it to Pope's Exorcist.
I'd like to also toss an honorable mention, a couple of honorable mentions for coolest dude. The Skinamarink demon, I think, is a pretty cool dude, and also Godzilla in Godzilla -1 is a pretty cool dude.
Godzilla
as well.
is the coolest dude. Oh damn!
A couple of non-traditional cool dudes.
Hell yeah! So last potty of the night. It's the Wait that came out this year award. This is for the movie that we've forgotten about already.
Knock at the Cabin.
Hey, me too. I will say, to summarize Knock at the Cabin, of the Shyamalan films that have come out recently, it's the one that offended me the least. I still think it was quite forgettable and not a very good movie that shied away from kills when it shouldn't have. And I thought it was kind of cowardly and lame. However, with a big old however, Dave Bautista's great.
It's the best movie that M. Night has made since Split. Not a very high bar. And yes, I agree. An immensely forgettable film that I was genuinely like, oh shit, that was this year. It felt like last year. But yeah, Big Dave is great in it. And it's not even a bad movie. I think it's totally fine, but it did not leave a meaningful impact on me at all. I think if Last Voyage of the Demeter had come out earlier in the year, that would be the answer. But that was in like August, so it's still like fresh enough that like I remember it more,
Yeah, I think Knock at the Cabin definitely hangs here. My other one I had jotted down here was 65. Even though we didn't cover it for the podcast, that movie feels like it came out 7 years ago already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow,
absolutely.
yeah, it does. I think 65 might be even more forgettable. I think the biggest affront that 65 brings to the table is that it didn't use real dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs that it did use like might as well have been real dinosaurs. So like, why didn't they? It's a weird, stupid choice. God, that movie
That's
is just
true.
so
There's not enough real dinosaur representation in cinema these days. All of these
yeah,
dinosaurs are out of work in
just
Hollywood
bad lame
because
CG.
They
It
took
just
our gerbs.
I think we should give it to Knock at the Cabin just because it's a movie we actually talked about on the pod this year.
I
I
agree.
didn't even really put 65 in contention. Like, it's not a horror movie. Like, I don't think we would ever talk about it on the podcast. So
Almost like
it's barely even worth mentioning.
it's hedging to rock-esque dinosaur horror.
Yeah,
A
kinda, I
genre
guess.
I would love to see more of. I love dinosaurs a lot.
It's the kind of movie I would give a pass for if it was actually good. To be like, hey, let's talk about it on the podcast, because even though it's not really a horror movie, like, it's like sci-fi, right? And it's good, it's worth talking about, but it's not that. It sucks. It's well, it doesn't suck, but it's just very, very forgettable and boring and a waste of its premise.
Well,
I think
that was it.
That does it. That's all of them. The last little thing I want to touch on, and we are running long, so we can wrap up pretty soon. But I've just something that I've been thinking about that I think is worth mentioning is I feel like this is maybe one of the, I hesitate to say worst, but least exciting years for horror film that we've seen since we've been doing this. And it's not to say that there aren't like good movies, but like looking at like my list, like the only 3 like horror adjacent movies that I think are truly great this year are like Infinity Pool, Godzilla, and Beau is Afraid. And none of those are even really true horror movies. I think stuff like Talk to Me and When Evil Lurks and Thanksgiving and Skinamarink are like very good movies, but like, I don't know, just like looking at past years, like last year we had like fucking The Northman and Crimes of the Future and Nope and Bones and All and Barbarian and Incantation and X and Pearl and The Menu, and it's like 2021 we had like In the Earth and Titan and Seder and Army of the Dead and Psycho Goreman and The Night House and Saint Maud and Malignant. And it's just like you keep looking back and it's just like I feel like in comparison 2023 was just kind of like there's absolutely movies worth seeing and worth talking about. But I don't know, just like sort of in like the bigger picture. I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like
when
this
you
was
look
kind
at the full list, like the last couple of years have just been wow after wow after wow, stinker, but wow after wow after wow. And here there's about 3 wows. I had a hard time. I had a hard time building out my top 5 this year, and I think that any other year, Pope's Exorcist wouldn't have been anywhere near the top. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think that to me that's a litmus test if there ever was, that like the Pope's Exorcist ended up on my top 5. It frankly shouldn't have.
And I do want to be clear, when I'm saying this, I mean specifically like horror movies, because I think, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, that like this has been a very good year for other movies. Most of my favorite movies from this year are non-horror movies. Stuff like Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer and John Wick and How to Blow Up a Pipeline and The Boy and the Heron and so on and so forth. It's like there have been some really fantastic movies that have come out this year. It's just like looking at like the horror landscape. I don't know, it feels like this year felt like it was holding its breath a little bit. I think we have a lot of exciting stuff slated for next year, which we'll talk about next week.
Yeah, I feel like the highs were extremely high, but they were much more few and far between.
Right.
Yeah.
So we didn't get a solid streak of like a solid horror summer or anything.
What I will say that kind of evens the board a little bit for me is that I don't know in the past couple of years if I need to rest on it a little bit longer. I literally just finished the series, but if I've encountered like a piece of art as great as Scavenger's Reign, Annihilation, like, is a film I still think about on a almost daily basis, and Scavenger's Reign is doing the same thing to me. It is. I think it engraved strange patterns on my brain. I'll continue to be affected by that series for a long time.
Yeah, I feel like this year like you said, Tease, was kind of a weak year for horror. But I do have to say, like Cleve was saying, it's been a very good year for TV. We've gotten a lot of awesome, seasons of TV, whether it was How To with John Wilson or Paul T. Goldman, or I Think You Should Leave. It was a phenomenal year for video games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Armored Core 6 and Baldur's Gate 3 and Pikmin 4 and Zelda, Street Fighter. So much good shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is all, of course, from our limited and very niche perspective as well. Yeah, I still think, it's been a solid year for horror, but not the best. But I do think that we have an exciting slate of things to look forward to in 2024. And we'll be that'll be our episode next week, our first episode of the new year. We'll be doing our predictions. We're doing it a little bit differently this year. We're going to be splitting up our predictions in half, and we're going to do the first half of the year next week, and then we're going to do the second half of the year after our mid-year catch-up. I think Ben made a very good point that the second half of the year is always hard to predict because things get moved around, things don't come out that are slated to, there's no release date for stuff, and it makes it more difficult. So we're gonna split it up, and that'll be next week. It'll be first episode of 2024. So be sure to join us for that. And until then, if you like the show, if you've been with us for the whole year or longer, please leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this. Helps us work our way up in the charts and the numbers and so on and so forth. You can always support us on Patreon as well at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. We've had a decent amount of growth on our Patreon this year, which is, not a whole lot, but for us it's important. And so we want to take a moment to shout out our honorary pod boys, as always. Sam, Zach, Micah, Mitchell, and Jans. Y'all are the best. We love and appreciate you, and we hope you'll be around with us for at least the next year to come. You can follow us at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. My extracurricular recommendation was something that Cleveland actually talked about at length earlier, so I'll keep it brief. But we did go see The Boy and the Heron a couple of days ago, and that's what I was saving for my end of the episode rec. It's really fucking good. If you're a Studio Ghibli Miyazaki head, what are you doing? Go see it. The English dub is great, which is, I think, a rarity, but really good.
Not necessarily a rarity to get Ghibli films, but yes. In anime in general.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My rec for this episode, go see Godzilla -1. We haven't talked about it for the podcast just yet, but it's a great movie. I'm going to go see it a second time tomorrow. I'm super excited. Just, phenomenal. You'll be missing out if you don't go out of your way.
You gotta see it on the big screen. You have a chance to see it on IMAX, fucking do that. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Oh, yeah. Man. I've talked about it enough on the podcast. Scavenger's Reign is incredible, and I think the next things I would recommend are what y'all just did, so there you go.
I think we've given you plenty of stuff to check out, and we hope you've enjoyed our 2023 year in review, and hope you'll be with us for the coming year. It has been a good year, as always, doing this with my boys, for you lovely listeners. It's great. We love it, and we thank you for listening, as always. Happy New Year!
I've invited you here to discuss something that's very important.
King Ghidorah, take me to your leader. Quick to claim that he not no snake like me neither. They need to take a breather. He been rhyming longer than Sigmund the Sea Creature. Been on Saturday feature. Pleased to meet ya. And came to wake you up out the deep sleeper. Like he needed to stop before he caught the knee drop. Even give you more sit than ZZ Top. When full bears thou shalt not more corner. Future like one more steps in y'all's corners. So-called rich, front if you wanna. When he spit electrics, don't be in y'all saunas. He only here to warn us what the plan is. The hour is up on us, it's bananas. Born alone, die alone, no matter who your man is. Hope he live long enough to tell it to his grandkids.